The meteor dust storm arrived without warning, as they always did in the outer rings of Aurora's reach. Daniel Hart pressed his forehead against the reinforced viewport of his cramped apartment, watching the glittering particles dance across the darkness like fireflies made of razor glass. Somewhere, in that swirling chaos, cargo ships would be delaying their docking sequences, which meant tomorrow's shift at the loading docks would run double time. His shoulders already ached at the thought. "Daddy, the lights are doing the pretty dance again." Lila's voice drifted from behind him, soft and drowsy. His 5-year-old daughter stood in the doorway of their single bedroom, dragging her favorite blanket across the metal floor. It had been her mother's once, though Lila didn't know that. Sarah had been gone for 3 years now, taken by the lung rot that claimed so many human workers in the station's lower levels. "They are, sweetheart, but you should be sleeping." Daniel turned from the window and scooped her into his arms, feeling how light she'd gotten. The month's ration cards had run thin again, and he'd been skipping meals to make sure she had enough. "Come on, back to bed." "Can you tell me about Earth again?" she asked, wrapping her small arms around his neck. Daniel's chest tightened. He'd never seen Earth himself, only heard stories from the older workers who remembered the world before the Great Silence War, before humanity's homeworld became a quarantined graveyard. But he told her the stories anyway, about blue skies instead of metal ceilings, about rain that fell from clouds instead of condensation dripping from pipes, about forests where trees grew taller than the station's central hub. After tucking Lila back into bed and waiting for her breathing to deepen into sleep, Daniel returned to the main room. The food storage unit hummed in the corner, nearly empty, except for 2 emergency nutrition bars and half a container of processed protein paste. Payday was still 4 days away. 4 days. He was calculating whether he could trade his next shift's overtime voucher for extra rations when a sound made him freeze. A heavy thud against his door, followed by a scraping noise, like something being dragged across the corridor floor. Daniel's hand moved instinctively to the work knife on his belt. Crime wasn't uncommon in Sector J3, where the station's security rarely bothered to patrol. Another thud, then silence. Daniel crept to the door and activated the security monitor. The corridor camera showed a figure slumped against his door, but the dim emergency lighting made it hard to distinguish features. What he could see made his blood run cold. The figure was too tall, the proportions wrong, not human. His finger hovered over the emergency alert button. Station security would come, eventually. But they'd also ask questions, search his apartment, maybe find the hidden stash of medicine he'd been saving for Lila's recurring infections. Medicine he'd acquired through less than legal channels. The figure moved slightly, and Daniel caught sight of something that made his decision for him. Clutched against the alien's chest was a bundle, and from within that bundle came a sound he knew too well. The weak, muffled cry of an infant. Against every instinct screaming at him to leave it alone, Daniel opened the door. The alien collapsed forward the moment the door slid aside, and Daniel barely managed to catch her before she hit the floor. She was heavier than she looked, her body covered in a form-fitting combat suit, torn in multiple places. Dark, purple blood seeped through the fabric. Her skin, where visible, was a deep blue-gray with a subtle scaled texture that caught the corridor's emergency lighting. Her face was angular, almost human but not quite, with high cheekbones and large eyes that flickered open for just a moment, revealing irises that swirled with colors Daniel had no names for. "Please," she whispered in accented standard, her voice carrying harmonics that made it sound like multiple people speaking in unison. "The child." Daniel looked at the bundle she protected, even in unconsciousness. Carefully, he pulled back the wrapping to reveal an infant, unlike anything he'd ever seen. The baby had the same blue-gray skin as the adult, with tiny scales that seemed to shimmer. Its eyes, when they opened, were enormous and completely black, like pools of liquid night. The rational part of Daniel's mind cataloged what he was seeing. The scales, the harmonics in the voice, the distinctive ridge patterns along the alien's arms. This was a Catherian, one of the warrior races that had fought against humanity in the Great Silence War. They were supposed to be enemies, the monsters from the stories that dock workers whispered during break time, the ones who had helped reduce Earth to a toxic wasteland. But all Daniel could see was a wounded being protecting a baby, bleeding out in a corridor, while the station's population of 30,000 souls went about their lives, indifferent to one more tragedy in the forgotten sectors. He made his decision. Daniel managed to drag the Catherian into his apartment, grateful that the late hour meant empty corridors. She was conscious enough to help slightly, her legs pushing weakly against the floor as he pulled her inside. Once the door sealed behind them, he guided her to the worn couch that doubled as his bed. "Water!" she gasped, and Daniel hurried to fill a container from their recycling unit. She drank desperately, some of the liquid spilling down her chin. The baby in her arms began crying in earnest now, a sound that was almost human, but carried an undertone that made Daniel's teeth ache. "The child needs—" The Catherian struggled to focus, her words slurring. "Needs warmth. Food. Please." Daniel looked at his nearly empty storage unit, then at the infant. He knew nothing about Catherian biology, but a hungry baby was a hungry baby. He grabbed one of the precious nutrition bars and dissolved it in warm water, creating a thin gruel. The Catherian watched through half-lidded eyes as he carefully fed the mixture to the infant, who accepted it eagerly. "You're not afraid," she observed, her voice weak but curious. "I'm terrified," Daniel admitted, supporting the baby's head as it fed. "But I'm also a father, and right now, that matters more." The Catherian's expression shifted into something that might have been surprise or gratitude. It was hard to tell with the differences in facial structure. Most humans would have called security, collected the bounty. "What bounty?" She laughed, a sound like wind chimes in a storm. "You don't watch the news feeds. There's always a bounty on Catherians, dead or alive. More for alive." She shifted, wincing at the pain. "My name is Rinla. This is—" She paused, looking at the infant. "This is Cree." "Daniel, and you're bleeding all over my couch. My apologies for the inconvenience of dying in your home." Despite everything, Daniel found himself almost smiling at the dry humor. He'd heard Catherians were humorless, killing machines. "You're not dying. Not if I can help it." He stood, mentally inventorying his hidden medical supplies. "Stay here. Don't move." "Where would I go?" Rinla asked, gesturing weakly at her injuries. Daniel retrieved his medical kit from its hiding spot behind a loose wall panel. The supplies had cost him 3 months of savings on the black market, meant for Lila's emergencies, but he couldn't watch another being bleed out on his floor, enemy or not. As he worked to clean and seal the worst of Rinla's wounds, she studied him with those swirling eyes. "You're very poor," she observed, not unkindly. "This dwelling, your possessions, you have almost nothing." "Thanks for the reminder," Daniel muttered, applying Synthiskin to a particularly deep gash. "Yet you share what little you have with an enemy and her child. Why—" Daniel paused in his work. Why indeed? He thought of Lila, sleeping in the next room. Thought of Sarah, who died because they couldn't afford proper medical care. Thought of all the times he'd been looked at with disgust or pity by the station's non-human majority, treated as less than because of his species. "Because someone has to be better," he finally said. "Someone has to break the cycle, or we'll all just keep bleeding on each other's floors until there's no one left." Rinla was quiet for a long moment. Then, so softly he almost missed it, she said, "Warm soul. You have a warm soul, Daniel Hart." Before he could respond, the apartment's emergency broadcast system crackled to life. Daniel's blood went cold as he recognized the priority override signal that preceded official security announcements. Attention all residents of Aurora's Reach. Be advised that a dangerous fugitive has been detected in station sectors J through L. The fugitive is a Catherian female, considered armed and extremely dangerous. She is traveling with an infant and may attempt to seek shelter or medical aid. A reward of 50,000 credits is offered for information leading to capture. Do not approach. Do not render assistance. Contact station security immediately if spotted. 50,000 credits. More money than Daniel would see in 5 years of dock work. Enough to get Lila proper medical care, better food, maybe even passage to one of the inner colonies where humans weren't treated like debris. He looked at Rinla, who was watching him with an expression of resigned acceptance. She made no move to reach for the curved blade he could see strapped to her thigh. Didn't tense for combat. Just waited. "That's a lot of money," she said quietly.
"It is."
"Your daughter needs things. I heard her coughing earlier. Lung rot, early stages, without treatment." "I know what happens without treatment," Daniel said sharply. Sarah's ghost seemed to hover between them. The reward would save her. Daniel stood abruptly and walked to the food storage unit. He pulled out the last nutrition bar and half container of protein paste. His hands shook slightly as he prepared another mixture for the baby, who had started fussing again. "Daddy." Lila's voice from the doorway made everyone freeze. She stood there in her nightgown, rubbing her eyes. Then she saw Rinla and the baby, and her eyes went wide. "Oh, are they friends?" Daniel's mouth went dry before he could speak. Lila had padded over to the couch, seemingly unbothered by Rinla's alien appearance. She peered at the baby with the fearless curiosity only young children possessed. "Baby's hungry," she announced with authority. "Like when Marcus's mama had her baby. They cry when hungry." She looked at Rinla. "You're hurt. Daddy can fix it. He fixed my knee when I fell." Rinla's expression softened in a way that transcended species. "Your father is very kind." "He's the best," Lila agreed solemnly. Then, to Daniel's horror, she climbed onto the couch next to Rinla, careful not to jostle her injuries. "What's your name?" "I'm Lila. I'm 5. How old is your baby?" "I am Rinla. The child is very young." Lila nodded sagely. "Babies are hard. They need lots of things. We can share our food, though. Daddy always says sharing makes things better." Daniel's chest constricted. They barely had enough food for themselves. And here was his daughter, offering to share with strangers who most of humanity would call monsters. He saw Rinla's eyes shimmer with what might have been tears, though he wasn't sure if Catherians cried the same way humans did. "Lila, sweetheart, why don't you go back to bed? I'll handle this." "But Daddy, they need help. You always say we should help people who need it." "These aren't people, Lila. They're different." Lila frowned at him with a disapproval that looked disturbingly like her mother's. "That's not nice, Daddy. Being different doesn't mean not people." Out of the mouths of babes, Daniel thought. He was saved from responding by another announcement from the security system. Update: fugitives suspected to be wounded and seeking medical attention. All medical facilities and supply merchants will be subject to random searches. Harbor fugitive at your own risk. Penalty includes immediate deportation to labor colonies. The labor colonies. Daniel had heard enough stories to know that was effectively a death sentence, especially for a human with a young child. But as he watched Lila gently pat the baby's tiny scaled hand, cooing softly when it wrapped its fingers around one of hers, he knew his decision was already made. "We need to hide you better," he told Rinla. "Security sweeps will start soon. They're lazy, but 50,000 credits might motivate them to actually check the forgotten sectors." "You're not turning us in," Rinla's voice carried genuine surprise. "Apparently not." Daniel ran a hand through his hair, already thinking through the logistics. There's a maintenance shaft in the bedroom. Leads to an abandoned storage unit 2 levels down. We can... A loud bang on the door cut him off. Then another. Station security, open up for random inspection. Daniel's mind raced. There was no time to move Rinla. No way to hide the purple blood staining his couch. No explanation for the alien infant that wouldn't end with all of them in custody. Daddy, Lila's voice was small, scared now. The banging came again, harder. Open up or we'll override the lock. Daniel looked at Rinla, who was struggling to sit up, her hand moving to her blade. He shook his head. Violence would only make things worse. Then he looked at his daughter, at the baby, at the wounded warrior who'd trusted him enough to let him tend her injuries. Hide in the bedroom, he told them. All of you. Now. Rinla moved with surprising speed despite her injuries, scooping up the baby and guiding Lila into the bedroom. Daniel heard the closet door slide shut, just as his front door's override engaged. 3 security officers entered, their uniforms crisp and clean, in a way that spoke of easy assignments and regular meals. The lead officer was human, which was unusual. Most humans in security were relegated to desk duty. This one had the look of someone who'd clawed his way up through being worse than those he served. Daniel Hart, the officer said, consulting a data pad. Dock worker, level 2, single parent. Behind on utility payments. Officer Marcus. Daniel read the name tag, keeping his voice steady. Random inspection. Marcus's eyes swept the room, lingering on the couch. That's a lot of blood for a dock worker. Industrial accident, Daniel said. Cut myself on a cargo container. You know how it is. Safety equipment's always breaking down in J3. Purple blood. Marcus stepped closer, and Daniel could smell expensive cologne, the kind that cost more than a week's wages. Lubricant mixed with blood. Looks purple under these lights. Daniel forced himself to stay calm, even as his heart hammered against his ribs. Marcus smiled, an expression that didn't reach his eyes. You wouldn't be lying to me, would you? Hart. Because harboring a fugitive, especially a Catherian. He let the threat hang in the air. I've got a 5-year-old daughter, sir. You think I'd risk her safety by letting one of those things near her? Where is the girl? Sleeping, please. She's been sick. She needs her rest. Marcus considered this, then nodded to his companions. Search the place. They were thorough, but not careful. Drawers were emptied, panels pulled off walls, his precious medical supplies scattered across the floor. Daniel watched in silent rage as they destroyed what little he had, knowing that any protest would only make things worse. One of the officers, a Thraxian with 4 arms, stopped at the bedroom door. Should I check in here? Is the child really sleeping? Marcus asked Daniel. As if on cue, a small cough came from behind the door. Lila's cough, the one that kept her up at night, the one that was getting worse. But this time, Daniel was grateful for it. She is, he said. Please. Marcus held his gaze for a long moment, then shook his head at the Thraxian. Leave it. No Catherian would hide in a room with a sick human child. They can't stand the smell of human illness. Daniel filed that information away, wondering if it was true or just another piece of propaganda. The search continued for another 10 minutes, though they found nothing incriminating. As they prepared to leave, Marcus stopped at the door. You know, Hart, that reward could change your life. Your daughter's life. Medicine for that cough. Real food. A better sector to live in. I'm sure it could, Daniel agreed. Think about it. A Catherian with a baby. She's probably looking for somewhere safe. Somewhere no one would think to look. Maybe somewhere poor and desperate enough that a few kind words and a sad story would buy sympathy. If I see anything, I'll call it in. Marcus smiled again, that predator's expression. You do that. Oh, and Hart, clean up that lubricant before it stains. Purple is such a hard color to get out. After they left, Daniel stood in the wreckage of his apartment for a full minute before his legs gave out and he sank to the floor. His hands shook with delayed adrenaline and suppressed rage. The bedroom door opened, and Rinla emerged, carrying the baby with Lila holding onto her free hand. "They destroyed everything," Rinla observed, her voice carefully neutral. "Nothing that can't be replaced," Daniel lied. "The medicine scattered on the floor suggests otherwise." Daniel started gathering the scattered supplies, trying to salvage what he could. "Why are they hunting you?" Rinla was quiet for so long he thought she wouldn't answer. Then, "It's complicated." 50,000 credits worth of complicated. More. Much more. She set the baby down in a makeshift nest of blankets and began helping him clean, moving stiffly but determined. "I should leave. They'll come back." "Yes, they will," Daniel agreed. "Which is why we need to be smarter about hiding you." Daniel looked at his daughter, who was carefully picking up scattered medicine vials with the seriousness of a child given an important task. He thought about the officer's words, about the reward, about the life that money could buy. Then he thought about the trust in Rinla's eyes when she'd let him treat her wounds, about the baby who needed food and warmth, about what kind of man he wanted his daughter to see him as. He confirmed. "But first, you're going to tell me why they want you so badly. No more secrets. Not if I'm risking everything." Rinla studied him for a moment, then nodded slowly. "Very well, but you may wish you had chosen ignorance." "I haven't had the luxury of ignorance since my wife died," Daniel said. "Start talking." As Rinla began her story, with Lila curled up beside her and the baby sleeping peacefully in its blanket nest, Daniel realized that his small, struggling life had just become part of something much larger and more dangerous than he could have imagined. The meteor dust still swirled outside their viewport, but now it seemed less like a dance and more like a warning of the storm to come. Rinla shifted on the damaged couch, her wounds still seeping through the makeshift bandages. The baby Cree slept fitfully in her arms, while Lila dozed against her shoulder, having refused to return to bed. Daniel sat across from them on an overturned supply crate, waiting. "The Great Silence War ended 15 years ago," Rinla began, her harmonious voice low. "At least, that's what your histories say, what the official records claim. But wars like that don't truly end. They just transform, go underground, become something else." Daniel leaned forward. "The Black Sun faction. They were destroyed at the Battle of the Void." Destroyed, scattered, hidden. These words mean different things to different people. Rinla absently stroked Lila's hair, the gesture surprisingly gentle for someone supposed to be a killing machine. "I was young during the war, barely past my training phase. I believed in the cause, believed humans were the plague the Black Sun claimed. Your species' rapid expansion, your adaptability, it frightened the old powers. And now I know fear makes fools of us all." She looked down at Lila. "Your daughter doesn't fear me. She sees only someone who needs help. When did we lose that clarity?" Daniel thought of Earth, poisoned and dead. "When the killing started." "Yes." Rinla's eyes swirled with darker colors. 3 months ago, I was assigned to a deep space reconnaissance mission. Routine patrol of the abandoned sectors near the terminus line. We found something we weren't supposed to find. The Black Sun, they're regrouping." "Not regrouping. They never left. They've been building, preparing, waiting." She shifted Cree to her other arm. "An entire fleet, hidden in the shadow of a dead star. Weapons that make the ones used in the war look like toys. And something else. Something worse." Daniel's mouth went dry. "What could be worse?" "A biological weapon designed specifically for humans. Not to kill, but to alter. To make your species into something else. something controllable. They call it the silence protocol because it removes the one thing that makes humans dangerous to them, which is your ability to hope against impossible odds, your stubbornness in the face of certain defeat. That warm soul I mentioned. They want to extinguish it, make humans into perfect slaves, alive but empty. Daniel stood abruptly, pacing the small room. "And you have proof of this?" Rinla reached into her torn combat suit and pulled out a small, crystalline device, no bigger than his thumb. It pulsed with an inner light. "Everything is in here. Fleet positions, weapon specifications, the formula for the biological agent, and a timeline. They plan to strike in 6 solar cycles." 6 cycles? That's barely 2 months. 53 days, to be precise. Rinla tucked the device away. "I tried to report it through proper channels. But the Black Sun has agents everywhere, even in the Catherian High Command. My entire unit was eliminated. I barely escaped." "The baby isn't yours," Daniel said. It wasn't a question. Rinla's expression tightened with pain that had nothing to do with her physical wounds. "No. Kree belongs to my patrol partner, Selvar. She died buying me time to escape. Made me promise to protect the child." "Why come here? Why Aurora's Reach?" "I wasn't trying to come here. My ship was damaged, navigation failing. This station was the closest port. I thought I could hide among the crowds, find passage to the inner council territories. Someone who would listen." She laughed bitterly. "I didn't expect the bounty to appear so quickly. The Black Sun's reach is longer than I thought." Daniel stopped pacing. "So, Officer Marcus? Could be an agent or just greedy. Does it matter? The result is the same." They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of the revelation settling over them like a shroud. Finally, Daniel asked the question that had been burning in his mind. "Why should I believe you? You're asking me to risk everything on the word of someone my species considers an enemy." Rinla carefully extracted herself from between the sleeping children and stood, moving to the viewport. The meteor dust was clearing, revealing the vast sprawl of the station and the stars beyond. "You shouldn't believe me," she said quietly. "By all logic, you should turn me in, take the credits, save your daughter. It's what I would do in your position. But," she turned to face him, "but you won't. Because you're human, and humans do impossibly stupid things for the right reasons. It's why the Black Sun fears you. It's why they need to change you." She gestured to the sleeping children. "Your daughter offered to share food you don't have with strangers who could kill her without effort. That's not logical. It's not survivable. But it's what makes your species dangerous to those who rule through fear." Daniel joined her at the viewport. "You're asking me to be a hero. I'm not a hero. I'm a dock worker who can barely feed his kid. I'm not asking you to be anything. I'm just trying to survive long enough to get this information to someone who can stop a genocide." She turned to him. "But if you're going to help, truly help, then we need to move. Marcus will be back, probably with more thorough scanners." "I know a place," Daniel said after a long moment. "But we'll need help getting there." "You have allies." Daniel thought of the forgotten people in the forgotten sectors, the dock workers and maintenance crews, the cleaners and recycling processors, the invisible army that kept the station running while being treated as barely more than equipment themselves. "Maybe there's someone who might help. But," he hesitated, "we have history. Romantic history. God. No. He's the one who got me the medical supplies. Runs a black market operation out of the lower maintenance tunnels. We had a falling out when I couldn't pay on time." "And you think he'll help?" "Rico's a bastard. But he hates authority more than he hates me. And he really hates Marcus. Something about a gambling debt that went bad." Rinla nodded slowly. "Then we go to this Rico. But first..." She moved to Kree, checking the baby's temperature with practiced efficiency. "The child needs proper nutrition. The mixture you made is keeping him alive. But Catherian infants need specific proteins. What kind of proteins? The kind that are illegal to possess on most human-occupied stations. She saw his expression. Another gift from the war. Your governments are afraid we'll breed armies in secret. Daniel laughed, short and bitter. Right. Because we're doing so well with the armies we already have. He moved to wake Lila. We'll have to go through the maintenance shafts. Can you manage with your injuries? I've survived worse. That's not exactly reassuring. 20 minutes later. They were making their way through the narrow maintenance tunnels that ran between the station's walls like veins. Daniel led, carrying Lila on his back, while she kept quiet with the practice of a child who'd learned early that sometimes silence meant safety. Rinla followed, Cree strapped to her chest in a makeshift carrier fashioned from torn sheets. The tunnels were hot and humid, filled with the constant thrum of machinery and the occasional skitter of station rats. Daniel navigated by memory and old maintenance markings, taking them deeper into the station's bowels. "Daddy, it smells funny," Lila whispered. "I know, sweetheart, just a little farther." They descended through 3 levels before Daniel stopped at a section of tunnel that looked no different from any other. He knocked on what appeared to be solid wall in a specific pattern. Nothing happened. He knocked again. "Go away." "Hart," came a muffled voice from somewhere behind the metal. "You still owe me." "It's about Marcus, Rico. He's hunting." There was a long pause. Then, the wall panel slid aside to reveal a hidden entrance. The man standing there was small and wiry, with the premature aging that came from too many years breathing recycled air and not enough real food. His left eye was cybernetic, a cheap model that whirred when it focused. "You brought guests," Rico observed, his good eye fixed on Rinla. "Dangerous guests." "The kind Marcus is looking for." Rico's expression shifted to interest. "The 50,000 credit kind." "The kind that knows why Marcus really wants her." That got Rico's full attention. He stepped aside, gesturing them in. 5 minutes. Then you leave." The hidden space beyond was larger than Daniel expected, carved out between structural supports and filled with salvaged equipment, black market goods, and enough food to feed the upper sectors for a week. 3 other humans were there, all bearing the hard look of survivors. "So," Rico said, settling into a makeshift throne of stacked crates, "tell me why I shouldn't call Marcus right now and split the reward with my associates here." Rinla stepped forward, and Daniel saw Rico's hand move to the plasma cutter on his belt. But she simply reached into her suit and pulled out the data crystal. "Because Marcus isn't working for station security," she said. "He's working for the Black Sun, and they're planning to turn every human in the galaxy into mindless slaves." Rico laughed. "The Black Sun is dead." "Then, why is a human security officer taking orders from them?" Rinla activated the crystal, and a small holographic display appeared, showing a partial communication log. The image was fuzzy, but Marcus's voice was clear, speaking in the clicking consonants of Black Sun battle language. Rico's laughter died. "That's not possible." "Show him the rest," Daniel said. Rinla cycled through the data, showing fleet positions, weapon schematics, and finally, the biological weapon specifications. Rico's face grew paler with each revelation. 53 days, he whispered. "They're going to hit in 53 days. "Unless this information reaches the Inner Council," Rinla said. "They're the only ones with enough power to mobilize a defense." Rico was quiet for a long moment, then looked at his associates. "Jake, what did Marcus do to your brother?" A scarred man in the corner spat. "Sent him to the labor colonies for stealing bread. He died in 3 weeks." "And you, Thomas, what about your wife?" An older man's jaw tightened. "Deported for missing a shift when she was sick. Haven't seen her in 2 years." Rico nodded slowly, then turned back to Daniel. "What do you need?" "Safe passage to the docking ring, and supplies for the baby. Catherian proteins." Cytherian proteins, Rico whistled. That's not just illegal. That's execution-level illegal. Since when has that stopped you? Daniel asked. Rico grinned, showing teeth stained from years of nutrient paste. Fair point, but it'll cost you. I don't have anything left to trade. Not you. Her. Rico pointed at Rinla. That combat suit you're wearing. It's military grade, worth a fortune to the right buyer. Rinla hesitated. The suit was more than armor. It was life support, communication, and her last link to her dead unit. But then Cree made a small sound, a weak cry that spoke of growing hunger, and her decision was made. Done, she said, already working the suit's releases. Underneath, she wore a simple bodysuit that revealed the full extent of her injuries. The scales along her arms were cracked and bleeding in places Daniel hadn't been able to properly treat. Rico sucked in a breath. You look like death walking. I've looked worse, Rinla said, handing over the combat suit. Rico passed it to Jake, who immediately began stripping it for parts. Thomas, get the medical kit. The real one, not the garbage we sell to tourists. Jake, you know where I keep the special supplies. As Rico's people worked, he pulled Daniel aside. This is bigger than your personal drama. Hart, if even half of what she's showing is real. It's real. You saw Marcus speaking their language. Yeah, I did. Rico rubbed his face. My grandfather was on Earth when it fell. Never talked about it. But I saw the scars, physical and otherwise. He looked over at Rinla, who was letting Thomas tend to her wounds while she fed Cree from a bottle of proper nutrients. Strange times when we're trusting the enemy to save us. Maybe that's the point, Daniel said. Maybe enemy is just another word for people we haven't tried to understand yet. Rico snorted. You always were too philosophical for dock work. He pulled out a battered datapad. There's a transport leaving for Meridian Station in 6 hours. Captain owes me favors. Big favors. He'll take you without questions. Meridian is still 3 jumps from inner council space. But it's outside Marcus's jurisdiction. And I have contacts there who can get you further. Rico transferred the information to Daniel's wristcom. Bay 94. Ship's called the Rust Bucket, which should tell you everything about its comfort level. We need to get to the docking ring without being seen. Leave that to me. Rico stood and addressed his people. We're going to create a distraction. Anonymous tip about contraband in Sector G. Every security officer will converge there, including our friend Marcus. What kind of contraband? Daniel asked. Rico grinned. The kind we're going to plant there. Enough to keep them busy for hours. As they prepared to leave, Lila tugged on Rico's sleeve. The black marketeer looked down at her with surprise. Thank you for helping, she said solemnly. Daddy says you're a bad man, but I think you're just sad. Rico's expression went through several changes before settling on bemused. Your kid's either going to save the galaxy or get you all killed. Hart. Probably both, Daniel admitted. They took a different route back, one that led through the industrial sectors, where the machinery noise would mask any sounds. Rinla moved better with proper medical treatment, though Daniel could see the effort it cost her. Cree, at least, seemed stronger after the proper feeding. They were almost to the designated maintenance exit when Rinla suddenly stopped, her hand going to where her weapon would have been. What is it? Daniel whispered. Something's wrong. The air patterns are different. Before Daniel could ask what that meant, the tunnel ahead of them exploded in sparks as a plasma bolt hit the wall. Marcus stepped into view, weapon drawn, flanked by 2 other officers. Did you really think I wouldn't monitor Rico's den? Marcus said, his smile cold. I've known about that little hideout for years. It's been useful, letting him think he was hidden. Daniel pushed Lila behind him. Marcus, this isn't what you think. Oh, I think it's exactly what I think. Marcus's weapon stayed trained on them. A dock worker harboring a Cytherian fugitive. The question is whether I bring you in alive or dead. Dead is easier. Less paperwork. The child needs medical attention, Rinla said, stepping forward. Whatever you're being paid, it's not worth killing an infant. Marcus laughed. You think this is about money? This is about the future. About humanity taking its rightful place. As slaves, Daniel asked. Because that's what the Black Sun is planning. Marcus's expression flickered with something that might have been uncertainty. The Black Sun offers order, structure, peace. They offer obedience, Rinla said. I've seen their peace. It's the silence of graves. Better than the chaos of freedom, Marcus replied. But there was less conviction in his voice. Daniel heard something in that hesitation. A crack in the certainty. You have family, Marcus. I've seen the pictures on your desk when I paid the fines. A daughter, about Lila's age. Don't. What happens to her when the silence protocol activates? When she becomes a hollow thing that looks like your daughter, but isn't? Marcus's weapon wavered slightly. They promised selected individuals would be protected. Those who proved loyal. They lied, Rinla said simply. The weapon doesn't discriminate. It can't. That's what makes it effective. For a moment, Daniel thought they'd reached him. Then Marcus's face hardened again. Lies. Desperate lies from desperate people. He raised his weapon. You're under arrest. All of you. What happened next occurred so fast, Daniel barely processed it. Lila, who had been silent behind him, suddenly darted forward, not toward Marcus, but to his left, where a maintenance panel covered an emergency air vent. Her small fingers found the release mechanism Daniel had shown her months ago during a safety drill. The panel exploded outward with a blast of pressurized air, striking one of Marcus's companions and sending him tumbling. In the confusion, Rinla moved, even wounded. Even without her combat suit, she was still a trained warrior. She struck Marcus's weapon hand, sending the plasma pistol spinning into the darkness, then drove her elbow into his solar plexus. The third officer raised his weapon toward Rinla, but Daniel was already moving. The work knife from his belt flew through the air, striking the officer's hand and making him drop his gun. Years of loading cargo had given Daniel's arms strength that surprised even him. In seconds, it was over. The three officers were on the ground, conscious but disarmed. Marcus glared up at them, hatred burning in his eyes. You're dead, he snarled. All of you. You can't run far enough. Maybe not, Daniel said, picking up one of the plasma pistols. But we can try. They bound the officers with maintenance tape and left them in a storage unit Rico's people would find later. As they hurried toward the docking ring, Daniel couldn't shake the feeling that they'd crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. That was brave, Rinla told Lila, who was riding on Daniel's back again. Dangerous, but brave. Daddy taught me the vents, Lila said proudly. For emergencies. Your daddy is a good teacher. They reached Bay 94 with minutes to spare. The rust bucket lived up to its name, a cargo hauler that looked like it was held together by hope and industrial adhesive. The captain, a human with more scars than teeth, took one look at Rico's authorization and waved them aboard without questions. As the ship prepared for departure, Daniel stood at a small viewport, watching Aurora's reach recede. Everything he'd known, the life he'd built after Sarah's death, was disappearing into the starfield. Regrets? Rinla asked, joining him. She held Cree, who was finally sleeping peacefully. Everything, Daniel admitted. But also, nothing. Does that make sense? Perfect sense. She was quiet for a moment. What your daughter did back there, that wasn't normal for a human child. Nothing about our life has been normal. No. I mean... Rinla hesitated. She anticipated Marcus's position, calculated the angle of the vent, executed a tactical diversion. Those are trained responses. Daniel looked back at Lila, who was exploring their small cabin with fearless curiosity. Her mother was different, special. Maybe some of that passed on. Maybe. Rinla shifted Kree to one arm and pulled out the data crystal. We have 53 days to get this to someone who can act on it. Meridian Station is a start, but we'll need to be careful. The Black Sun will know we escaped. They'll be watching the main routes. Then we take the forgotten routes, Daniel said. The paths the poor and desperate use. The ones people like Marcus never think to watch, because they can't imagine anyone important would use them. Rinla studied him. You're not what I expected from a human. You're not what I expected from a Catherian. Perhaps that's the point. Perhaps the unexpected is what saves us. The ship's engines engaged with a rumble that shook the entire vessel. As they pulled away from the station, accelerating toward the jump point, Daniel allowed himself a moment of hope. They were fugitives now, racing against time with impossible odds. But they were also something else. Something the Black Sun hadn't calculated for a human dock worker. A Catherian warrior, and 2 children, bound together by choice rather than blood, by trust rather than fear. It wasn't much against an armada hidden in dark space. But sometimes, Daniel thought, remembering his wife's words, the smallest light casts the longest shadow. "Daddy," Lila called, "come see the stars look different from here." Daniel smiled and went to his daughter. Rinla, following with Kree. Together, they watched the stars stretch into lines as the ship prepared to jump, carrying them toward an uncertain future, but away from a certain doom. Behind them, on Aurora's Reach, alarms began to sound as Officer Marcus was discovered. The hunt would begin soon. But for now, for this moment, they were free. And sometimes that was enough to start with. The rust bucket shuddered as it dropped out of hyperspace near Meridian Station, its aging hull groaning in protest. Daniel gripped the edge of his seat, trying not to show his discomfort for Lila's sake. She sat beside him, eyes wide with wonder at the swirling colors of the jump space dissipating outside their viewport. "Pretty," she exclaimed, pointing at the residual energy patterns. "That's the fabric of space-time repairing itself," Rinla explained from across the cramped cabin, adjusting Kree in her arms. "Your human scientists call it quantum foam. Foam-like in a bath. Similar principle, different scale." Rinla's expression softened, something Daniel had seen more frequently over the 3 days of their journey. "Though I doubt the universe needs soap." Lila giggled, a sound that seemed to surprise Rinla every time she caused it. Daniel watched the interaction with mixed feelings. His daughter was adapting to their situation with the resilience only children possessed, but he worried about what this life on the run would do to her. The ship's captain, a grizzled man named Foster, spoke over the intercom. "Meridian Station in 20 minutes. Start gathering your things. What little you have, anyway." Daniel checked their meager supplies. Rico had been generous, but 3 days of travel had depleted their food reserves. The credit chip Rico had provided would help, but they'd need to be careful. 50 days remained until the Black Sun's attack, and they still had to reach inner council space. "There's something you should know about Meridian," Rinla said quietly, moving closer to Daniel. "It's neutral territory, but that neutrality is maintained through a careful balance of mutual threat. Every faction has operatives here, including the Black Sun, especially the Black Sun. They use it as a recruitment hub, targeting desperate humans with promises of power and protection." Daniel felt his jaw tighten. "And we're walking right into it." "We don't have a choice. Rico's contact is our best chance for passage to the inner council, but we'll need to be careful. Keep Lila close." As Meridian Station grew larger in the viewport, Daniel saw why it was considered neutral. The station was massive, easily 5 times the size of Aurora's Reach, built in a spiral pattern that reminded him of ancient Earth seashells. Different sections bore the architectural styles of various species, creating a patchwork of technologies and aesthetics. "It's beautiful," he admitted. "It's dangerous," Rinla corrected. Beauty often is. They docked at a busy commercial port, streams of beings from dozens of species moving through the arrival gates. Daniel pulled up his hood and kept Lila's hand firmly in his, while Rinla wrapped Cree more tightly and covered her distinctive scaled features with a borrowed cloak. The contact Rico had arranged was supposed to meet them at a place called the Neutral Zone, a bar that allegedly served every species in the galaxy. They made their way through the station's middle tier, avoiding the security checkpoints by following maintenance corridors Rico had mapped for them. The crowd grew denser as they approached the commercial district. Daniel saw humans here, more than he'd seen in years, but they moved with the furtive quickness of people who knew they weren't entirely welcome. Some wore collar devices that marked them as indentured workers. Others bore the telltale signs of Black Sun recruitment, a small tattoo behind the ear that looked decorative, but was actually a loyalty brand. "Daddy, why do those people have marks?" Lila asked, pointing before Daniel could stop her. One of the marked humans turned, a woman with hollow eyes and an expression that didn't quite reach human anymore. She stared at them for a long moment, her gaze lingering on Rinla's concealed form, before turning away. "We need to move faster," Rinla whispered. They ducked into an alley between two vendor stalls, taking a longer but less crowded route. The smell of alien spices and cooking meat filled the air, making Daniel's stomach growl. He ignored it, focusing on navigation. They were almost to the neutral zone when trouble found them. Well, what have we here?" The voice came from behind them, smooth and cultured with an accent Daniel couldn't place. They turned to find three beings blocking the alley's exit. The speaker was humanoid, but definitely not human, with skin that seemed to shift between purple and black, depending on the angle of light. A Shadowkin, Daniel realized, one of the Black Sun's preferred enforcer species. "Just passing through," Daniel said, pushing Lila behind him. "With a Catherian. How interesting." The Shadowkin's completely black eyes fixed on Rinla. "There's quite a bounty on Catherian females traveling with infants, especially ones who match a certain description." "You're mistaken," Rinla said, her voice carefully neutral. "I'm just a refugee seeking passage." "Refugees don't usually carry military-grade data crystals," the Shadowkin said, and Daniel's blood went cold. The being was holding a scanner, its display showing the electromagnetic signature of the crystal hidden in Rinla's clothing. "That's some very interesting radiation patterns, the kind that comes from Catherian military encryption." The two other enforcers, both heavily modified humans with cybernetic enhancements, moved to flank them. Daniel calculated odds and didn't like the results. The alley was narrow, limiting movement. They had one plasma pistol between them, taken from Marcus, against three armed opponents. "What do you want?" Daniel asked. "The crystal, the Catherian, the bounty." The Shadowkin smiled, revealing rows of sharp teeth. "You and the children can go. This one-time offer expires in 10 seconds. "No," Lila said, stepping out from behind Daniel before he could stop her. "You can't take Rinla. She's family now." The Shadowkin laughed, a sound like grinding glass. "Family, a human child claiming a Catherian as family? How amusing." "It's not amusing," Lila said, with the seriousness only a 5-year-old could muster. "It's true. Family isn't about what you look like. It's about who takes care of you." Something in the Shadowkin's expression shifted. For just a moment, Daniel saw something almost like pain flicker across those alien features. Then it was gone, replaced by cold professionalism. "Touching, but irrelevant. 5 seconds." Daniel's hand moved to the plasma pistol, knowing it was hopeless. But before he could draw it, Rinla spoke in a language he didn't recognize. The Shadowkin's eyes widened in shock. "You speak the old tongue," the being asked in standard. "I speak many tongues," Rinla replied, continuing in the alien language. Daniel couldn't understand the words, but he heard the urgency in them, the careful negotiation. The Shadowkin was silent for a long moment after she finished. Then, unexpectedly, it stepped aside. "Go," it said. "Quickly, I saw nothing." "Why?" Daniel asked, unable to help himself. The Shadowkin looked at Lila, who was still standing defiantly between the adults. "Because the child is right. Family is about who takes care of you. And once, long ago, a Catherian warrior saved my clutch siblings from slavers. A debt is a debt." Its eyes hardened. "But if I see you again, the debt is paid. Go. Now." They didn't need to be told twice. Daniel scooped up Lila, and they hurried past the enforcers. Rinla close behind with Kree. They didn't stop until they reached the neutral zone, ducking inside the dimly lit establishment. The bar was exactly as advertised, a chaotic mix of species and cultures. Humans sat next to Thraxians. Shadowkin shared tables with Aurelius merchants. And in one corner, a group of synthetic beings played what looked like an elaborate form of three-dimensional chess. There, Rinla pointed to a booth in the back where a figure sat alone. Hood pulled up to hide their features. They made their way over, Daniel's nerves on edge. The figure looked up as they approached, revealing a scarred human face with kind eyes. "You must be Hart," the woman said. "Rico sent word. I'm Captain Torres. Sit. Quickly." They slid into the booth, Lila ending up squeezed between Daniel and Rinla. "Rico said you need passage to inner council space," Torres continued, keeping her voice low. "That's not easy these days. The borders are locked down tighter than a merchant's purse." "We can pay," Daniel started, but Torres waved him off. "This isn't about money. The inner council is paranoid right now. Rumors of Black Sun resurgence have them checking every ship 3 times over. A human and a Catherian traveling together with children, you'll be detained immediately." "We have information they need," Rinla said carefully. Torres studied her. "Information worth dying for. Information worth killing for. The Black Sun is already hunting us. I noticed. That Shadowkin enforcer you talked your way past, he's killed 15 bounties this month alone. You must have one hell of a silver tongue." "She spoke the old tongue," Daniel said. "What is that?" Torres's eyebrows rose. "The pre-war trade language. Dead for 50 years. Where did you learn it?" "My grandmother," Rinla said quietly. "She believed in a time when all species could speak as equals. She'd be disappointed to see how things turned out." Torres was quiet for a moment, then pulled out a datapad. "There might be a way, but it's not pleasant, and it's not safe." "Nothing about this is safe," Daniel pointed out. "Fair point." Torres pulled up a schematic. "There's a medical transport leaving tomorrow. Officially, it's carrying plague victims from the outer colonies to a research facility on Haven Prime, which is inner council territory. Unofficially, it's smuggling refugees who can pay enough to be listed as corpses." Corpses, Daniel's stomach turned. "Stasis pods. You'll be unconscious for the journey. Life signs suppressed to near death. The manifest will list you as deceased plague victims, being transported for study. No one checks the dead too closely." "How long?" 8 days to Haven Prime. From there, you're on your own to reach the inner council." Daniel looked at Rinla, who was calculating risks he could only imagine. 8 days in stasis, helpless, trusting their lives to strangers. "The children," Rinla said. "Is it safe for them?" "Safer than staying here," Torres replied. "Word's already spreading about a Catherian with a baby. By tomorrow, every bounty hunter in 3 systems will be converging on Meridian." A commotion near the bar's entrance made them all tense. A group of station security had entered, scanning the crowd. Their leader was human, wearing the black uniform of Black Sun sympathizers. "Decision time," Torres said urgently. "We'll do it," Daniel said, surprising himself with the conviction in his voice. "When do we leave?" "Meet me at Docking Bay 12, Level C, at Oro 300 station time. That's 6 hours from now. Come alone, no witnesses. Bring nothing that can identify you. Torres stood. And hope your information is worth the risk I'm taking. She left through a back exit, leaving them in the booth as security continued their sweep. Daniel pulled Lila closer, feeling her trembling slightly. Scared? He asked softly. A little, she admitted. But Mommy always said being scared is okay as long as you don't let it stop you. Daniel's throat tightened. Sarah would have been proud of their daughter's courage, and probably horrified at the danger he'd put her in. We need somewhere to lay low for 6 hours, Rinla said, watching the security team. They're using biometric scanners. They'll identify us if we get too close. Daniel thought quickly. The station was huge, but their options were limited. Then he remembered something from the map Rico had provided. The Temple District, he said. Rico marked it as a surveillance dead zone. Something about religious freedom laws preventing scanning. Temples won't welcome a Catherian, Rinla pointed out. The human ones might. There's supposed to be a Church of Universal Harmony there. They accept everyone. They waited until the security team had moved to the other side of the bar, then slipped out through the same exit Torres had used. The alley beyond led to a service corridor that connected to the Temple District. The change in atmosphere was immediate. The commercial noise faded, replaced by various forms of devotional music and the scent of incense from a dozen different worlds. Beings moved more slowly here, some in meditation, others in prayer to deities Daniel had never heard of. The Church of Universal Harmony was small, squeezed between a Thraxian shrine and what looked like a crystalline structure that hummed with harmonic frequencies. A human woman in simple robes stood at the entrance, her face weathered but peaceful. Welcome, she said, then paused, noticing Rinla. Her expression didn't change. All are welcome here. We need sanctuary, Daniel said simply. Just for a few hours. The woman studied them, taking in Lila's exhaustion, the baby in Rinla's arms, the desperation they couldn't quite hide. Follow me, she said. She led them to a small room behind the main chapel, furnished with simple cots and a water reclaimer. Rest here. You're safe. The security forces honor the sanctuary laws, mostly. Why help us? Rinla asked. The woman smiled. Because that's what we do. Help those who need it, regardless of species, creed, or past. The universe has enough division without us adding to it. After she left, they settled onto the cots. Lila fell asleep almost immediately, curled up against Daniel's side. Cree fussed until Rinla sang something in her own language, a lullaby that sounded like wind through crystal chimes. Tell me about Sarah, Rinla said suddenly, after the baby had quieted. Daniel was surprised by the question. Why? Lila mentioned her mother knowing things, being special. And there's something about the child herself, the way she thinks, the way she moves. It's not typical for human young. Daniel was quiet for a long moment, debating how much to share. Finally, he spoke. Sarah was part of a program before the war, genetic enhancement for human adaptability. Nothing dramatic, just small improvements to reflexes, pattern recognition, environmental adaptation. The program was shut down when the war started, deemed too dangerous, but the enhancements were hereditary. So Lila has her mother's gifts, and probably more, since the enhancements tend to strengthen in second-generation subjects. Daniel stroked his daughter's hair. I've tried to keep it hidden. Enhanced humans aren't exactly welcome anywhere. The Black Sun would be very interested in her, Rinla said quietly, which is another reason we can never let them win. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, two unlikely allies, bound by circumstance and growing trust. Finally, Rinla spoke again. The data crystal contains more than just military intelligence. There are personnel files, including Black Sun agents embedded in various governments. Your officer Marcus was small-time compared to some of them. How high does it go? High enough that we can't trust official channels. We need to get directly to the Inner Council's emergency committee. They're the only ones with both the power and the paranoia to act on this information. Daniel checked the time. 3 hours until they needed to meet Torres. 3 hours before they put their lives in the hands of strangers again. "Do you trust her, Torres?" he asked. "I don't trust anyone," Rinla replied. "But sometimes you have to act as if you do. It's the only way forward." A soft knock at the door made them both tense. The priestess entered, carrying a tray of food. "I thought you might be hungry," she said, setting it down. Simple fare, but hot and nourishing. "And there's something you should know. Security forces are conducting door-to-door searches in the commercial district. They haven't reached here yet, but they will." When Daniel asked, "An hour, maybe 2. The Temple Council is debating whether to allow it." "Not enough time. They'd have to leave early. Risk exposure getting to the docking bay." "There's another way," the priestess said, seeming to read his thoughts. "The maintenance tunnels beneath the temples connect to the lower docking rings. Officially, they don't exist. Unofficially, we use them to help refugees." "Why are you helping us?" Daniel asked. "You don't know us, what we've done, what we're carrying." The priestess smiled. "I know you're protecting children. I know you're afraid, but still moving forward. That's enough." She pulled out a small device. "This will guide you through the tunnels. Leave in 30 minutes. The security sweep will be focused on the main temple then." After she left, they quickly ate and prepared to move. Daniel woke Lila gently, explaining they had to go on another adventure. She nodded sleepily, too tired to complain. The tunnel entrance was hidden behind a false wall in the temple's lower level. It was cramped and dark, lit only by phosphorescent strips that barely provided enough light to navigate. They moved in single file, Daniel leading with the guide device, Lila behind him, and Rinla bringing up the rear with Kree. The journey felt endless, though the device claimed it was only 2 kilometers. They passed beneath other structures, occasionally hearing voices or footsteps above. Once, they had to freeze as a security patrol passed directly overhead, their scanners unable to penetrate the shielded tunnel walls. Finally, they emerged in a storage area near Docking Bay 12. Torres was already there, checking manifest data on a handheld device. "You're early. Good. We've had a complication." Daniel's heart sank. "What kind of complication?" "The transport's been flagged for additional inspection. Someone tipped off security about possible smuggling. We need to get you into the pods before they arrive." She led them quickly to a medical transport, its hull marked with biohazard warnings in multiple languages. Inside, rows of stasis pods lined the cargo hold like metallic coffins. "These 4, Torres indicated pods in the middle row, already programmed with false identities. You'll be sedated first, then the stasis field will engage. You'll wake up on Haven Prime." "What if something goes wrong?" Daniel asked, helping Lila toward one of the pods. "Then you don't wake up," Torres said bluntly. "But the alternative is certain capture. Your choice." It wasn't really a choice. Daniel lifted Lila into one of the pods, his heart breaking at the fear in her eyes. "It's like sleeping," he told her. "And when you wake up, we'll be somewhere safe. Promise." "Promise." The sedative was administered through a hypospray. Lila's eyes fluttered closed within seconds. Daniel kissed her forehead before the pod sealed. Rinla was settling Kree into a specially modified pod designed for infants. The baby didn't even wake as the sedative took effect. "Your turn," Torres said. Daniel climbed into his pod, feeling like he was entering his own grave. Rinla took the one beside him. "See you on the other side," she said. "Is that Catherian optimism? Human influence, I'm afraid." "Despite everything," Daniel smiled. Torres administered the sedatives. As consciousness faded, Daniel's last thought was of Sarah. She would have been proud of him for trying, even if they failed. The pod sealed. Darkness claimed him, and 8 days of nothing began. Above them, security forces stormed the docking bay, but found only a medical transport carrying plague victims to Haven Prime. The manifest was in order, the biohazard warnings legitimate enough to discourage close inspection. The transport departed on schedule, carrying its secret cargo toward inner council space. But in the darkness between stars, other forces were moving. The Black Sun had received word of the escape from Meridian. Ships were being repositioned, agents activated. The hunt was far from over. And somewhere in the void, a massive fleet hidden in the shadow of a dead star continued its preparations, counting down to the moment when humanity would face its final silence. Consciousness returned like drowning in reverse. Daniel gasped, his lungs burning as they remembered how to breathe. The stasis pod's lid was already open, harsh white light stabbing into his eyes. He tried to sit up, but hands pushed him back down. "Easy," a voice said. "Not Torres. Someone new. The disorientation will pass. You've been in stasis for 8 days." Daniel's vision slowly focused on a medical technician, human, wearing the blue insignia of Haven Prime's refugee services. Behind her, he could see other pods opening. Rinla was already sitting up, though her scales had taken on a grayish tinge that suggested she wasn't handling the awakening well. "Lila," Daniel croaked, his throat raw. "The child is fine. All of you survived the journey." The technician helped him sit up slowly. "Though I have to ask, what kind of plague victims arrive with concealed weapons and military-grade encryption devices?" Daniel's blood went cold. But before he could respond, Rinla spoke. "The kind that were never sick to begin with," she said calmly. "I assume Captain Torres arranged for our special handling." The technician smiled slightly. "She did. You're lucky she has friends in useful places. Follow me, all of you. We need to move quickly." Lila was awake now, rubbing her eyes and looking around with confusion. "Daddy, did we sleep the whole time?" "We did, sweetheart." Daniel lifted her from the pod, relieved to feel her warm and alive in his arms. "We're on Haven Prime now." "It doesn't look very prime," she observed. And Daniel had to agree. The medical bay was functional but worn, with that particular shabbiness that came from too many refugees and not enough funding. They were led through a series of corridors to a small office where a tired-looking man in administrator's robes waited. His name tag read, Director Hollis. "I'll be direct," Hollis said without preamble. "Torres says you have information vital to inner council security. Normally, I'd process you through standard refugee channels, which would take weeks. But she's never asked for favors like this before, so I'm inclined to listen. You have 5 minutes to convince me why I should risk my position to fast-track you to the council." Rinla pulled out the data crystal. "Because in 42 days, the Black Sun is going to deploy a biological weapon that will enslave every human in the galaxy." Hollis's expression didn't change. "The Black Sun was destroyed at the Battle of the Void." "Look at the data," Daniel said. "Just look at it, then decide if we're worth the risk." Hollis hesitated, then inserted the crystal into his desk terminal. His eyes widened as he scrolled through the information. This can't be real. A hidden fleet, the silence weapon." "It's real," Rinla said. "I lost my entire unit getting that information out." Hollis was quiet for a long moment, then reached for his communication device. "I need to make some calls. Wait here." He stepped out, leaving them alone. Daniel could hear urgent conversation in the hallway, but couldn't make out the words. "What if he doesn't believe us?" Lila asked. "Then we find another way," Daniel said, though he had no idea what that would be. 20 minutes passed before Hollis returned, his face grave. "There's been a development. 3 hours ago, a Black Sun strike team hit a refugee processing station on the edge of the system. They were looking for someone, a Catharian female with specific biomarkers." He looked at Rinla. "Your biomarkers." "How many died?" Rinla asked quietly. 38 refugees, 15 staff members." Hollis's voice was hard. They tortured the director for information before killing him. He was a friend. The weight of those deaths settled over the room like a shroud. Daniel pulled Lila closer, feeling the tremendous guilt of their survival. They're getting desperate, Rinla said. Which means we're running out of time. The Inner Council has agreed to see you, Hollis said. But not in the way you'd expect. There's someone they want you to meet first. Someone who's been tracking Black Sun movements independently. Who? He calls himself the Archivist. Former military intelligence. Went rogue after the war. The Council tolerates him because his information is always accurate. Hollis pulled up a map on his terminal. He's in the lower districts. Not exactly Council territory. Daniel studied the map. The lower districts were marked in red, designated as high crime areas. Why there? Because that's where the forgotten people live. The war veterans who came back broken. The refugees who never found homes. The enhanced humans who can't hide what they are. Hollis gave Daniel a meaningful look. Your daughter's enhancement markers showed up in her medical scan. That's actually why the Council agreed to this meeting. The Archivist has a soft spot for enhanced humans. It's dangerous, Rinla said. Everything about this is dangerous, Hollis replied. But if you want the Council to act on your information, you need the Archivist to verify it. He has resources and connections they don't. An hour later, they were descending into the lower districts via a cargo elevator that groaned with every meter. The refugee services had provided them with worn civilian clothes and enough credits for basic supplies. Cree was strapped to Rinla's chest, in a proper carrier now, sleeping peacefully despite the circumstances. The lower districts assaulted the senses immediately. The air was thick with industrial fumes and the smell of too many beings in too small a space. Narrow streets wound between towering hab blocks that blocked out most of the natural light. Vendors hawked questionable food and even more questionable services from makeshift stalls. But what struck Daniel most was the number of humans. Not just humans, but obviously enhanced ones. A woman with eyes that glowed slightly in the dim light. A man whose movements were too quick, too precise to be natural. Children playing a game that required reflexes no baseline human could match. They're like me, Lila whispered, watching the enhanced children with wonder. Yes, Daniel said, understanding why the Archivist had chosen to live here. Among the forgotten and the changed. The address Hollis had given them led to what had once been a library, its stone facade crumbling, but still bearing the carved inscription, "Knowledge is power, but wisdom is survival." The door was reinforced steel, newer than the building, with a security system that looked military-grade. Daniel pressed the entry button. For a moment, nothing happened. Then a voice, cultured and precise, spoke from a hidden speaker. Daniel Hart, former dock worker, Aurora's Reach. Wife Sarah, deceased. Part of the Prometheus Enhancement Program. Daughter Lila, second-generation enhanced, showing markers for accelerated pattern recognition and tactical analysis. Daniel's hand moved instinctively to his concealed weapon. The voice continued. Rinla of the Catherian 3rd Battle Fleet, survivor of the Terminus Line massacre, currently carrying military intelligence regarding Black Sun resurgence and caring for infant Cree, orphaned at Checkpoint Sigma. How do you know all this? Rinla demanded. Because knowing things is what I do. Come in. We have much to discuss and little time to do it. The door opened with a heavy click. Inside, the library had been transformed into something between a command center and a museum. Walls of screens displayed data streams from across the galaxy. Artifacts from the war, both human and alien, were carefully preserved in display cases. Books, actual paper books, filled shelves that reached to the ceiling. The Archivist himself stood in the center of it all. He was older than Daniel expected, perhaps 60, with silver hair and eyes that held too much knowledge. But what made Daniel stare was the man's left arm, clearly cybernetic but more advanced than anything he'd seen, moving with perfect fluidity. "Welcome," the archivist said. "I've been expecting you since you left Aurora's Reach. Rico is an old friend. He keeps me informed." "You know Rico?" Daniel asked. "I know everyone who matters in the Forgotten Places. It's how we survive." He gestured to chairs arranged around a tactical display. "Sit. Show me what you have." Rinla handed over the data crystal. The archivist inserted it into his system, and the tactical display lit up with the information. For several minutes, he was silent, manipulating the data with gestures that his cybernetic arm translated into commands. "Fascinating," he finally said, "and terrifying. The fleet positions match energy signatures we've been tracking but couldn't explain. The biological weapon." He paused, pulling up additional data. 3 months ago, several human colonies reported missing persons, all enhanced individuals. Now I know why. They were testing subjects. "Testing for what?" Daniel asked, though he dreaded the answer. "To ensure the weapon would work on all human variants. Enhanced, baseline, even the synthetic hybrids." The archivist pulled up medical data. "The silence weapon doesn't just suppress higher cognitive functions. It rewrites them, turning humans into biological automatons that follow Black Sun commands without question or resistance." "Can it be stopped?" Rinla asked. "Prevented, yes. Reversed once deployed unknown." The archivist turned to Lila, who had been quietly observing everything. "What do you see, child?" Lila looked at the tactical display, her enhanced mind processing the patterns. "They're scared," she said simply. "The Black Sun. They're putting all their ships in one place because they're scared of being found separately." The archivist smiled. "Excellent observation. Fear makes them vulnerable. It also makes them dangerous." He turned back to the adults. "The Inner Council won't act on this information alone. They'll debate, form committees, demand more proof. By then, it will be too late." "So what do we do?" Daniel asked. "We give them something they can't ignore. A Black Sun operative, captured and willing to talk." The archivist pulled up another display. 3 days ago, a ship arrived at Haven Prime. Officially, it's a merchant vessel. Unofficially, it's carrying a Black Sun recruitment team. Their leader is someone you know. The display showed a face that made Daniel's blood run cold. Korik. The same scarred features, the same cruel eyes, but now wearing the uniform of a Black Sun commander. "He's here for you," the archivist said. "He's been tracking you since Meridian, and he's not alone. He has a strike team of 20 operatives." "Then we run," Daniel said immediately. "Get off planet before he finds us." "Running won't solve the larger problem," Rinla said, though Daniel could see she was calculating combat scenarios. "No. But there's another option," the archivist said. "We use Korik's obsession against him, draw him out, capture him, and present him to the Inner Council as proof of the Black Sun threat." "Use us as bait," Daniel said flatly. "Essentially, yes. But with significant backup." The archivist gestured, and the screens showed various images. "Every enhanced human in these districts has a reason to hate the Black Sun. They took our lives, our futures, our families. Give us a chance to strike back, and we will." "You're talking about starting a war," Rinla said. "I'm talking about preventing genocide," the archivist corrected. "The question is whether you're willing to take the risk." Before anyone could answer, alarms began blaring throughout the building. The archivist's screens lit up with security feeds showing armed figures surrounding the library. "Too late for debate," the archivist said, surprisingly calm. "Korik found you faster than anticipated." A voice, amplified by speakers, echoed through the building. "Daniel Hart, I know you're in there. Send out the Catherian and the data, and I might let you and your daughter live." Daniel recognized Korik's voice, dripping with false reasonableness. "He's lying," Lila said, matter-of-factly. His voice does the thing Daddy's does when he says I can have dessert but doesn't mean it. Despite the situation, the archivist chuckled. Your daughter will make an excellent intelligence analyst someday. We need to get out, Daniel said, checking his weapon. No, Rinla said. We need to fight. Here, now, while we have defensive position. With what army? Daniel demanded. The archivist smiled and pressed a button on his console. With this one. The screens showed movement throughout the district. Enhanced humans emerging from buildings, carrying weapons that looked military-grade. Veterans in patched armor taking positions. Even some non-humans. Those who'd made the lower districts their home, preparing to fight. You planned this, Rinla said with something like admiration. I've been planning for something like this since the war ended, the archivist admitted. The Black Sun's return was inevitable. The only question was when and how we'd respond. Another announcement from outside. You have 5 minutes to comply. After that, we come in, and everyone dies. Daniel looked at his daughter, at Rinla holding Kree, at the archivist with his wall of accumulated knowledge. If we fight, people will die. If we don't fight, humanity dies, the archivist replied. Sometimes those are the only choices we get. Daniel thought of Sarah, of what she'd say in this moment. She'd been a fighter, right until the end. She'd want him to protect not just Lila, but every child who might face the Black Sun's future. What do you need us to do? He asked. The archivist's smile was sharp. Survive long enough for me to execute the plan. Korik wants you alive for interrogation. That gives us an advantage. Some advantage, Daniel muttered. Daddy, Lila tugged on his sleeve. The bad man outside. He was at the station. Wasn't he the one who hurt people? Yes, sweetheart. Then we have to stop him. That's what heroes do. We're not heroes, Lila. Maybe not, she said with 5-year-old wisdom. But we're here, and that's what matters. The archivist began issuing orders through his communication system, coordinating the enhanced humans outside. Rinla moved to a defensive position, having found an energy rifle in the archivist's collection. Daniel stayed with Lila and Kree, his weapon ready but hoping he wouldn't need it. 3 minutes remaining, Korik announced. Let me talk to him, Daniel said suddenly. Buy us more time. The archivist nodded and opened a communication channel. Korik, Daniel said, his voice carrying through the speakers outside. This is Daniel Hart. Ah, the dock worker. You've caused me considerable trouble. Not as much as I planned to. Korik laughed. Brave words from a dead man. You have no idea what you're interfering with. I know you're planning to enslave humanity. I know about the weapon. There was a pause. Then you know resistance is futile. The Black Sun rises again. And this time, we won't make the mistake of leaving survivors. You already have, Daniel said. You left me. One human dock worker. You're nothing. Maybe. But this nothing has your plans, your fleet positions, and evidence of your entire operation. The Inner Council will receive it all, unless you withdraw. You're bluffing. Daniel looked at the archivist, who nodded. Check your data feeds, Korik. The information is already being transmitted. Kill us. And it completes automatically. It was partially true. The archivist had begun transmission, but it would take time, and Korik's people could potentially jam it. Clever, Korik admitted, but not clever enough. 1 minute, Hart. The archivist pulled Daniel aside. He'll breach simultaneously from multiple points. Standard Black Sun tactics. But they don't know about the building's modifications. What modifications? Before the archivist could answer, explosions rocked the building. But instead of walls crumbling, energy shields flared to life, absorbing the blasts. The library had been transformed into a fortress. Now, the archivist commanded. The enhanced humans outside attacked in coordinated strikes. Energy weapons fired from concealed positions. Veterans who'd fought in the war used tactics the Black Sun operatives didn't expect from civilians. The battle for the lower districts had begun. Inside, Korik's forces tried to breach through windows and service entrances, only to find each one defended. Rinla moved with lethal grace, her rifle taking down operatives before they could establish positions. The Archivist's cybernetic arm, reconfigured into a weapon Daniel had never seen before, firing projectiles that seemed to phase through cover. Daniel kept Lila and Cree protected behind an overturned desk. But he could see his daughter watching everything with those enhanced eyes, her mind cataloging patterns and strategies. "They're going to try the roof next," she said suddenly. "How do you know?" Daniel asked. "Because that's what I would do." The Archivist heard her and redirected defenses upward, just as Black Sun operatives repelled from above. The predictive insight of a 5-year-old enhanced human had saved them from being flanked. The battle raged for 20 minutes that felt like hours. The library's defenses held, but ammunition was running low. Several enhanced humans had fallen outside, and Daniel could hear Korik organizing for a final push. Then, unexpectedly, sirens filled the air. Not local security, but military ones. Inner Council forces were approaching. "How?" Daniel asked. The Archivist smiled. "I may have sent them a preview of the data with location coordinates. They're not fast, but they're thorough." Korik's voice came over the speakers again, but now it was angry, desperate. "This isn't over, Hart. You've delayed the inevitable. Nothing more." "Maybe," Daniel replied, "but sometimes delay is all we need." Through the windows, they could see Black Sun operatives retreating, Korik among them. But as he left, he looked directly at the library, and Daniel could see him mouth words meant for him alone. "I'll find you." Inner Council forces secured the area within the hour. A Commander Walsh, human to Daniel's surprise, took their statements and the data crystal. She was professional but skeptical until the Archivist provided additional evidence, including recorded communications from Korik's assault. "This will go to the emergency committee immediately," Walsh said. "If even half of this is accurate, we're looking at the greatest threat since the original war." "It's all accurate," Rinla said firmly. Walsh studied her. "A Catherian warning humans about a threat to humanity. These are strange times." "Times change," Rinla replied, looking at Daniel and Lila. "People change, sometimes for the better." Walsh left with her forces, taking several captured Black Sun operatives with her. The lower districts began to return to their version of normal, though Daniel noticed the enhanced humans moved with more purpose now, organized in a way they hadn't been before. "You've started something," he told the Archivist. "You started it when you chose to help her," the Archivist replied, indicating Rinla. "I just gave it direction." They were provided quarters in a secure facility, while the Inner Council deliberated. It was the nicest place Daniel had stayed in years, but he couldn't relax. Korik was still out there, and they had 40 days before the Black Sun fleet moved. That night, as Lila slept between them on a large couch, Daniel and Rinla talked quietly. "He'll come for us again," Rinla said. "I know. The Council might not act in time." "I know that too." "So what do we do?" Daniel looked at his sleeping daughter, at Cree in his makeshift crib, at this strange family they'd become. "We be ready. We gather allies. And when Korik comes, we end this." "You've changed," Rinla observed. The dock worker who opened his door to a wounded enemy wouldn't have talked about ending anyone. "That dock worker didn't have as much to lose," Daniel replied. "Or as much to protect." Rinla was quiet for a moment, then reached over and placed her scaled hand over his human one. The gesture was alien in its execution, but human in its intent. "Whatever comes," she said, "we face it together." "Together," Daniel agreed. Outside, Haven Prime's 3 moons rose over the city, casting strange shadows through the windows. Somewhere in those shadows, Korik was planning his next move. The Inner Council was debating humanity's future. The Black Sun fleet was preparing for war. But in that moment, In that room, a human and a Catherian sat in comfortable silence, protecting two sleeping children, proving that sometimes the smallest acts of trust could stand against the greatest darkness. The war for humanity's soul had begun, and it had started with a warm meal shared between strangers on a cold station night. The inner council chambers were nothing like Daniel had imagined. Instead of gleaming halls and imposing architecture, the emergency committee met in a bunker deep beneath Haven Prime's surface. The walls were reinforced steel, scarred from past attacks, and the air tasted recycled and stale. "They're taking this seriously," Rinla observed, noting the defensive positions and automated weapon systems. Daniel adjusted Lila on his lap. They'd been waiting for 2 hours while the committee reviewed the data. Kree slept in a carrier against Rinla's chest, oblivious to the tension that filled the room like smoke. The door finally opened, and Commander Walsh entered, followed by 5 beings of different species. Daniel recognized a Thraxian counselor, an Aurelius trade representative, and 3 others he couldn't identify. Notably, there were no Catherians present. "The committee has reviewed your intelligence," the Thraxian spoke, its 4 arms moving in what Daniel had learned was a gesture of acknowledgement. "We find it credible but incomplete." "Incomplete," Rinla's voice carried an edge. "There's a fleet preparing to attack in 38 days. What more do you need?" "Proof that cannot be fabricated." An ethereal being that seemed to be made of crystallized light responded. "Data can be manipulated. We need physical evidence." Daniel felt his frustration rising. "You had Korik attacking the lower districts, Black Sun operatives in custody. What more proof do you need?" "Korik escaped before we could interrogate him properly," Walsh admitted. "The operatives we captured had neural blocks. They died rather than reveal information." "So you're going to do nothing?" Daniel stood, causing Lila to slide off his lap with a small protest. "We're going to investigate," the Aurelius representative said smoothly. "Send reconnaissance missions to verify the fleet's location. If confirmed, we'll mobilize." "That will take weeks," Rinla said. "We don't have weeks." The crystalline being pulsed with different colors. "Then perhaps you should have brought this to our attention sooner, rather than going through irregular channels." "I tried the regular channels," Rinla said coldly. "My entire unit was murdered for it." An uncomfortable silence filled the room. Finally, the Thraxian spoke again. "You'll be placed in protective custody while we investigate. For your safety." "You mean house arrest," Daniel said. "Call it what you wish. The decision is made." The committee began to file out. "Wait," Lila suddenly spoke up, her young voice cutting through the formal atmosphere. "You're scared." The crystalline being paused, colors shifting to what might have been surprise. "What did you say, child?" "You're all scared. Not of the Black Sun. Of being wrong. Of acting." Lila's enhanced perception was reading micro-expressions, body language, energy patterns. "Mommy used to say scared people make bad choices." "Your mother is not here to offer counsel," the Aurelius said dismissively. "No," Lila agreed solemnly. "She died because scared people didn't help when she was sick." The accusation hung in the air like a blade. The committee left without another word, but Daniel saw something shift in Walsh's expression before she departed. They were escorted to a secure apartment in the government district. It was comfortable, even luxurious by Daniel's standards, but the guards outside and the locked doors made it clear they were prisoners. "We failed," Daniel said, slumping onto a couch. "No," Rinla disagreed. "We planted seeds. Now we wait to see if they grow." "We don't have time to wait." A soft chime from the door interrupted them. Walsh entered, alone this time, carrying a secured case. "Officially, I'm here to check on your accommodations," she said. "Unofficially," she opened the case, revealing weapons, communication devices, and credit chips. "The archivist sends his regards," You know him, Daniel asked. He saved my life during the war. Enhanced humans weren't exactly popular in the military, but he didn't care about my modifications, only my skills. Walsh pulled out a datapad. The council will debate for days, maybe weeks. But there are those of us who remember what bureaucratic delays cost during the First War. What are you saying? Rinla asked. I'm saying that if someone were to escape protective custody and happen to find evidence that forced the council's hand, well, that would be unfortunate but useful. Walsh moved to the window, pointedly looking away. The guards change shift in 6 hours. The one who takes over is new, inexperienced. He might forget to properly secure the maintenance access. Why help us? Daniel asked. Walsh turned back, and for the first time, Daniel noticed the slight glow in her eyes that marked her as enhanced. Because that little girl is right. We're scared. But some of us are more scared of doing nothing. She headed for the door, then paused. Korek's ship is still in the system. He's hiding in the asteroid mining facilities on the outer rim. If someone wanted to find him. She left the sentence unfinished and departed. Daniel and Rinla exchanged glances. It's a trap, Rinla said. Obviously, but whose trap, Walsh's or Korek's? Does it matter we can't stay here while the council debates? They spent the next hours preparing. Daniel cleaned and checked the weapons Walsh had provided. Rinla studied the mining facility schematics on the datapad. Lila played with Kree, but Daniel could see her listening, absorbing everything. When the shift change came, everything happened exactly as Walsh had suggested. The new guard, barely out of training by the look of him, forgot to properly lock the maintenance panel. They slipped through into the service tunnels that ran throughout the government district. Where are we going? Lila whispered. To find the bad man, Daniel said, hating that he was bringing his daughter into danger again. Good. He needs to be stopped. The archivist had provided transportation, an old shuttle registered to a mining company. It was waiting at a private dock, fully fueled and loaded with additional supplies. A note was attached to the pilot's seat. Make it count. The journey to the mining facilities took 3 hours. Rinla piloted, while Daniel tried to plan for what felt like an impossible situation. They were walking into Korek's territory with 2 children, minimal backup, and no clear strategy beyond find evidence. There, Rinla pointed to a cluster of asteroids that had been hollowed out for mineral extraction. Heat signatures suggest active operations, but no official mining scheduled for this sector. They docked at an auxiliary port that appeared abandoned. The artificial atmosphere inside was functional, but minimal, and gravity generators created a disorienting effect as they moved between different asteroid sections. Stay close, Daniel told Lila, who nodded seriously. They moved through empty corridors, following the heat signatures on their scanner. The facility should have been full of workers, but it was eerily quiet. Blood, Rinla said quietly, pointing to dark stains on the floor. Days old. Daniel's grip on his weapon tightened. They followed the trail deeper into the facility until they reached what had been the main processing center. The scene inside made Daniel pull Lila against him, covering her eyes. Bodies, dozens of them, mining workers, all human, arranged in neat rows. Test subjects, Rinla said, scanning them with a medical device. They were exposed to something. Chemical markers consistent with the silence weapon. They tested it on civilians. Daniel's voice was hollow with horror. We needed to know if the modifications worked, a familiar voice said from above. Korek stood on an elevated platform, flanked by a dozen operatives. He looked different, his scarred face bearing new marks that seemed almost ritualistic. You came. I knew you would. Heroes are so predictable. Korek descended slowly, confidently. Did you really think Walsh was helping you? She's been working with us for months. The enhanced human military network has been compromised from the beginning. Daniel's mind raced. If that was true, then the archivist, The resistance in the lower districts. Everything was compromised. "You're lying," Rinla said, but Daniel heard uncertainty in her voice. "Am I? How do you think we found you so quickly at every turn? Aurora's Reach, Meridian, the library." Korik smiled. "We let you run. We needed to see who you'd contact, what networks you'd expose, and you performed beautifully." "Then why do you need us now?" Daniel asked, trying to buy time while he looked for escape routes. "Because the data crystal you carry has a tracer, but more importantly, it has incomplete information. The real deployment date isn't 38 days away. It's tonight." Daniel's blood went cold. "That's impossible." "Is it while the Inner Council debates? Our fleet is already moving. In 6 hours, the silence weapon will be deployed across 17 major systems simultaneously. Every human will become a servant of the Black Sun, except for selected individuals. Of course." His gaze fell on Lila. "Enhanced humans will make excellent commanders for our slave armies." "Never," Daniel snarled, pushing Lila further behind him. "You won't have a choice. None of you will." Korik gestured, and his operatives raised their weapons. "But I'm not without mercy. Surrender now, and I'll ensure you're among the protected. You'll keep your minds. Serve willingly, rather than as automatons." "Daddy," Lila whispered. "He's lying about something." Daniel listened to his daughter's enhanced perception. "What is it, sweetheart?" "The time. He's scared about time, like he's running out of it." Korik's expression flickered with irritation. "Silence the child." That's when Rinla moved, not toward Korik, but to a control panel on the wall. Her fingers flew across it, and suddenly alarms began blaring throughout the facility. "Mining laser emergency activation," an automated voice announced. "All personnel evacuate immediately." "You fool," Korik shouted. "You'll kill us all." "That's the idea," Rinla said grimly. "The weapon dies with you." The facility shook as massive mining lasers, designed to carve through asteroids, began firing randomly. Sections of the ceiling started to collapse. Korik's operatives scattered, some running for exits, others trying to shut down the system. In the chaos, Daniel grabbed Lila and ran. Rinla was right behind them with Kree. They could hear Korik shouting orders, pursuing them through the collapsing facility. They reached a junction where the corridor split. "This way," Daniel said, remembering the schematics. But as they turned, Walsh stepped out from a side passage, weapon drawn. "I'm sorry," she said, and Daniel could see she meant it. "They have my sister. Enhanced humans are so rare now. I couldn't let her die." "So you betrayed everyone else." Rinla's voice was ice. "I tried to help. The weapons, the information. I thought maybe you could stop them without—" Walsh's weapon wavered. "I didn't know about the test subjects. The civilians." "Help us now," Daniel said urgently. "It's not too late." Walsh looked at Lila, perhaps seeing her sister and the young, enhanced girl. Her weapon lowered slightly. That's when Korik appeared behind her. Without hesitation, he shot Walsh in the back. She crumpled, her enhanced reflexes not fast enough to save her. "Weak," Korik spat. "Sentiment makes you all weak." Daniel fired, but Korik was already moving, his own enhancements making him inhumanly fast. The shot missed, and then they were running again, deeper into the failing facility. They reached the mining control center, a reinforced chamber designed to survive laser malfunctions. Daniel sealed the door behind them, knowing it would only buy minutes. "We're trapped," he said. "No." Rinla was at the main console. "The mining lasers can be redirected, if we target them correctly." "You want to signal someone?" "I want to destroy something." She pulled up a tactical display. "Korik's ship. It's docked 3 sections over. If it's carrying the silence weapon, the explosion would destroy the entire facility." "And us with it," Rinla agreed. "Unless—" She pointed to an emergency evacuation pod in the corner of the room. "Mining facilities always have them. reinforced against asteroid impacts. That's insane, Daniel said. That's our only option. The door began to buckle under impacts from outside. Korik had brought cutting tools. Daddy, I'm scared, Lila admitted. Daniel knelt beside her. Me too, sweetheart. But sometimes we do scary things to protect people. Like Mommy did. Daniel's throat tightened. Sarah had known she was dying, had fought to live long enough to say goodbye to Lila. Exactly like Mommy. Rinla finished the calculations. Ready, get in the pod. They crammed into the emergency pod, barely fitting with the two children. Rinla initiated the launch sequence, then set the mining lasers to converge on Korik's ship in 30 seconds. Hold on, she said. The pod launched just as the door burst open. Daniel saw Korik's face, contorted with rage, before acceleration slammed them back into their seats. Behind them, the mining facility exploded. The shockwave caught their pod, sending it spinning through space. Daniel held Lila tight, while Rinla protected Kree. Emergency systems screamed warnings about hull integrity and life support. Then, suddenly, they were caught in a tractor beam. No, Daniel breathed. Had they survived only to be captured? The pod was pulled into a ship's bay. As the door opened, Daniel prepared to fight with whatever strength remained. But instead of Black Sun operatives, they saw the archivist, surrounded by enhanced humans in combat gear. Cutting it close, he said with a slight smile. We've been monitoring since you left. Walsh's betrayal was suspected, but not confirmed until tonight. The weapon, Rinla gasped. The deployment was a lie. Korik was bluffing about tonight, but the threat is still real. The archivist helped them from the pod. However, the explosion you just caused was visible on every scanner in the system. The Inner Council can't ignore this anymore. As if on cue, his communication device activated. The Thraxian Counselor's image appeared. We've detected a massive explosion at Mining Facility 779. Black Sun technology signatures confirmed. The Council is convening emergency session. About time, the archivist said. We'll provide testimony and evidence. Korik, Daniel asked. No body recovered yet, but nothing could have survived that explosion. Daniel wasn't so sure. Men like Korik had a way of surviving the impossible. 3 days later, they stood before the full Inner Council, not just the emergency committee. Representatives from every major species and faction were present, including a delegation of Catherians, who looked at Rinla with expressions ranging from respect to suspicion. The evidence was presented: the test subjects from the mining facility, recovered data from Korik's destroyed ship, confirming the silence weapon's existence, testimony from captured operatives whose neural blocks had been broken by Catherian mind speakers. The threat is real, the council president, an ancient Aurelius, announced. The Black Sun fleet exists. The weapon exists. And we have less than 35 days to respond. What about the embedded agents? Daniel asked. Walsh said the network was compromised. We're conducting a purge. Commander Torres appeared, apparently having been part of the resistance all along. Every enhanced human in military service is being vetted. It's causing chaos, but necessary. And the fleet? Rinla asked. A joint task force is being assembled. The Catherian delegation leader spoke. Your people and ours, together for the first time since the war. It should have felt like victory, but Daniel couldn't shake the feeling that they were still missing something. That night, in their quarters, Lila asked the question that had been haunting Daniel. Is the bad man really gone? Daniel wanted to lie, to give her the comfort of certainty, but she would know. I don't know, sweetheart, maybe. He felt like the kind of bad that doesn't give up, she said with disturbing insight. Rinla entered, having put Kree to sleep. The child is right. Men like Korik don't die easily. Then we stay ready, Daniel said. We've exposed them, united the council, started the resistance. That has to count for something. It does, Rinla agreed. She sat beside them, this strange family forged in crisis. Your warm soul, Daniel Hart. It started all of this. One act of kindness that may have saved the galaxy. We haven't saved anything yet. No, but we've given everyone a chance. Sometimes that's all heroes can do. Lila yawned, exhaustion finally overwhelming her enhanced awareness. As Daniel carried her to bed, she mumbled, "Mommy would be proud." "Yes," Daniel whispered. "She would." When he returned, Rinla was standing at the window, watching the lights of Haven Prime's government district. "What happens after?" she asked. "If we stop the Black Sun, what happens to us?" Daniel joined her at the window. "I don't know. Do you want to go back to your people? My people tried to kill me for exposing the truth. Your people barely tolerate you because of what Lila is." She paused. "Maybe home isn't about species anymore." "Maybe it's about family," Daniel suggested. "A human dock worker, a Catherian warrior, and 2 children against the galaxy." Rinla's expression might have been a smile. "It sounds like a bad joke." "Or a new beginning." Before she could respond, their communication device activated. The archivist's face appeared, grim. "We have a problem. Deep space monitors have detected movement. The Black Sun fleet is advancing ahead of schedule. We have 10 days, not 35. Daniel felt the weight of it settle on his shoulders. 10 days to mobilize, coordinate, and stop an enemy that had been preparing for years. "There's more," the archivist continued. "We've received a transmission, audio only. You need to hear this." He played the recording. The voice that came through was damaged, distorted, but unmistakably familiar. "Daniel Hart," Korik's voice rasped. "You thought you killed me. You thought you won. But I am the Black Sun's wrath incarnate. I survived your pathetic trap. And I'm coming, not just for you, but for every human who dares resist. The little girl with her special gifts. I'll save her for last. She'll watch everyone she loves become slaves before I decide her fate." The transmission ended. "He's alive," Daniel said numbly. "And he's angry," Rinla added. "The Council wants you in protective custody again," the archivist said. "Deep bunker, maximum security." "No," Daniel said firmly. "We're done hiding. If Korik wants a fight, he'll get one." "Daniel," Rinla started. "He threatened Lila. He threatened our family." Daniel's voice was steel. "We end this. Not the Council, not the fleet. Us." The archivist nodded slowly. "I thought you might say that. I'm transmitting coordinates. A ship will be waiting. It's not official, not sanctioned. But sometimes the unofficial path is the right one. You're helping us go after him. I'm helping you do what needs to be done. The fleet will handle the Black Sun Armada. But Korik, he's personal. And personal battles need personal solutions." After the transmission ended, Daniel and Rinla stood in silence. They both knew what this meant. They were choosing to walk into almost certain death. "I'll understand if you want to stay," Daniel said. "Take Kree somewhere safe." "Kree is safe with us," Rinla replied. "We're family. Remember, family faces things together." Daniel felt something shift inside him. The dock worker who had opened his door to a wounded alien was gone. In his place stood someone harder, someone willing to do whatever it took to protect those he loved. "Then we prepare," he said. "And when Korik comes, we show him what happens when you threaten our family." Outside, the stars continued their eternal dance, indifferent to the drama below. But among them, 2 fleets prepared for battle. And somewhere in the darkness between, a scarred man plotted vengeance against the unlikely family that had cost him everything. The final battle was coming, and this time, there would be no running. The ship the archivist had provided was a modified interceptor, built for speed rather than comfort. Daniel checked the weapon systems while Rinla plotted their course to intercept Korik's projected position. The children were secured in the crew quarters, though Daniel knew they were both awake, listening. The Joint Fleet is mobilizing, the archivist reported over the comm. They'll engage the Black Sun Armada in 8 days. Whatever you're planning with Korik needs to happen before then. Understood, Daniel replied, though he had no real plan beyond finding Korik before Korik found them. There's something else. The archivist continued. I've been analyzing the data from Korik's ship. The silence weapon has a control node, a master switch that can activate or deactivate all deployed units. If Korik survived, he likely has it. So we're not just hunting him for revenge, Rinla said. We're hunting him because he can still trigger the weapon. Precisely. Even if the fleet wins. If Korik activates the weapon first, it won't matter. The communication ended, leaving them with the weight of that knowledge. Daniel moved to check on the children. Lila was pretending to sleep, but her enhanced awareness made deception difficult. I know you're awake, he said softly. She opened her eyes. Are we going to die, Daddy? Daniel wanted to lie, but she would know. Maybe, but we're going to try very hard not to. If something happens to you, I'll take care of Kree, she said with a seriousness that broke his heart. Nothing's going to happen to any of us, he said, wishing he believed it. In the cockpit, Rinla was studying tactical displays with an intensity that suggested she was planning for war. Daniel settled into the co-pilot seat. He'll choose the location, she said. Somewhere symbolic. Korik's type always needs their victories to mean something. Where would be symbolic for him? Rinla pulled up a star chart. The terminus line. Where my unit was ambushed. Where this all really started. She highlighted a section of dead space, littered with the wreckage of ships from the war. It's also where the Black Sun fleet is hidden. He'll want to watch his victory from where it all began. Daniel studied the area. It was a graveyard in space. Thousands of destroyed vessels floating in eternal silence. Sensors would be nearly useless with all the metallic interference. It was perfect for an ambush. We're walking into a trap, he said. Yes, but sometimes the only way to spring a trap is from inside it. They traveled for 2 days, the tension growing with each hour. Daniel taught Lila basic emergency procedures, while Rinla sang to Kree in her language, songs that sounded like funeral dirges and lullabies combined. On the 3rd day, they reached the terminus line. The devastation was worse than any image could convey. Ships from dozens of species floated in pieces, some still venting atmosphere after 15 years. It was a monument to the war's brutality, left untouched as a warning. There, Rinla pointed to an energy signature among the wreckage. A ship, powered but trying to hide. Korik? They maneuvered carefully through the debris field. Daniel could feel Lila watching from the doorway. Her enhanced senses, probably picking up dangers he couldn't perceive. Daddy, she said suddenly, there's more than one ship. Before Daniel could respond, their sensors screamed warnings. 6 Black Sun fighters emerged from behind larger wreckage, weapons charging. Hold on, Rinla threw the ship into a spiral, narrowly avoiding the first volley. The interceptor was fast, but they were outnumbered. Daniel took the weapons controls, firing at the pursuing fighters while Rinla wove between floating hulks of destroyed battleships. Can we outrun them? He asked. Not all of them, and not to anywhere safe. She made a hard decision. We go through. Through what? She pointed ahead to the massive wreckage of a Catherian dreadnought. Its hull cracked open like an egg. My old ship, the Stellar Whisper. Daniel understood. She knew every corridor, every room. It would even the odds. Maybe. They dove into the wreckage through a gaping torpedo hole. The fighters followed, but the confined space made their numbers less of an advantage. Rinla navigated by memory through corridors that had once been her home, while Daniel picked off fighters that got too close. They emerged on the other side with only 2 fighters still pursuing. Daniel's weapons took care of one, and Rinla used the debris field to eliminate the other, tricking it into colliding with a piece of spinning hull. That was too easy, Daniel said. Because it was meant to be, Rinla agreed. He's hurting us. Sure enough, ahead of them loomed a Black Sun cruiser, weapons powered and aimed directly at them. But it didn't fire. Daniel Hart, Korik's voice came over the comm. His face appeared on screen, and Daniel gasped. Half of it was burned beyond recognition, replaced with crude cybernetics. The explosion had taken its toll. You did this to me, Korik said, his voice distorted by damaged vocal cords. But I survived. I always survive. And now, you'll watch everything you love die. Big words from a half-dead man, Daniel replied, though his hands were shaking. Half-dead is enough to kill you all. Korik held up a device, small and black with pulsing red lights. The master control for the silence weapon. One push, and every human in 3 systems becomes my slave, including your precious daughter. The weapon doesn't work on enhanced humans, Rinla said. The old version didn't. This one does. We made sure of that after studying the test subjects. His ruined face attempted a smile. Come aboard. Face me. Or I activate it now. If we come aboard, you'll kill us and activate it anyway, Daniel said. Perhaps. But if you don't come, I activate it immediately. At least this way. You have a chance to stop me. Minimal. But you humans love your impossible odds. Daniel looked at Rinla. They both knew it was their only option. We're coming, he said. They docked with the cruiser, leaving the children hidden in a smuggling compartment Rinla had discovered. It was shielded and locked from inside, the safest place they could be. No matter what happens, Daniel told Lila, you stay hidden. Take care of Kree. Daddy, no, I can help. You are helping by staying safe. He kissed her forehead. I love you. I love you too. Both of you. She looked at Rinla, who seemed surprised by the inclusion. The cruiser's interior was dark, lit only by emergency lighting that cast everything in red. Bodies of Black Sun operatives littered the corridors. He killed his own people, Rinla observed. Or something killed them, Daniel replied, noting the claw marks on some bodies. They followed the lights toward the bridge, weapons ready, but knowing they were walking into whatever Korik had planned. The bridge doors opened automatically, revealing Korik standing at the center, the control device in one hand, a plasma blade in the other. The dock worker and the traitor, he said. You cost me everything. My position, my body, my future. You did that yourself when you chose the Black Sun, Daniel replied. I chose strength, order, purpose. Korik began to circle them. You chose weakness disguised as compassion. If we're so weak, why do you fear us? Rinla asked. I don't fear you. I hate you. He moved with unnatural speed, the cybernetics giving him enhanced reflexes. The fight was brutal and quick. Korik's blade caught Daniel across the ribs before he could react. Rinla managed to wound Korik's arm, but he backhanded her across the bridge with inhuman strength. Pathetic, Korik said, standing over Daniel as he bled. You thought love and friendship could defeat the natural order. Still might, Daniel gasped, his hand pressed to his wound. Korik raised his blade for the killing blow. That's when Lila's voice echoed across the bridge comm. You forgot about us. Korik spun to see Lila and Kree on the security monitor. She had left the compartment and found a communications terminal. Get back to safety, Daniel shouted. No, he needs to know something. Lila's 5-year-old voice carried in strange authority. Kree isn't Rinla's baby. Everyone froze. Even Korik seemed stunned by the unexpected statement. What are you talking about, child? He demanded. Tell them, Rinla. Tell them whose baby Kree really is. Rinla struggled to her feet, purple blood running from a cut on her forehead. For a moment, she was silent. Then she spoke, her voice heavy with old pain. Kree is the child of Captain James Morrison, a human officer who died saving my unit during a Black Sun ambush 18 months ago. The bridge was silent except for the hum of electronics and Daniel's labored breathing. That's impossible, Korik said. No human would save Catherians. He did. We were investigating Black Sun activity, working together in secret. The peace between our species was fragile, but some of us believed it could grow. When the Black Sun discovered our cooperation, they sent kill teams after both human and Catherian units. Rinla's voice grew stronger. Morrison's team was wiped out. He was dying, but he still fought to get us to safety. His last words were about his unborn child, how he'd never see them grow up. "So you took the child," Daniel said, understanding flooding through him despite the pain. "Morrison's partner died in childbirth. The child would have been sent to an orphanage, forgotten. I couldn't let that happen, not after what he sacrificed." She looked at Korik. "A human died to save Catherians. A Catherian raised a human child as her own. Your Black Sun ideology is built on lies." "Lies!" Korik screamed, his damaged face contorting further. "You speak of anomalies, not truth." "Then here's another anomaly," Lila said from the monitor. She had moved to another panel. "I found the ship's communication system, and I'm smart enough to use it." Warning lights flashed across the bridge. On the main screen, multiple signals showed incoming ships, the Joint Fleet, arriving days early. "You called them," Korik breathed. "The archivist taught me how," Lila said proudly. "He said I might need it." Korik's rage was absolute. He raised the control device. "Then you'll all watch humanity die before the fleet arrives." He pressed the activation button. Nothing happened. He pressed it again, frantically. Still nothing. "It needs biometric confirmation," Rinla said, pulling herself up using a console. "And you're only half the man you used to be. Your biometrics don't match anymore." Korik's scream was inhuman. He charged at Rinla with his blade. But she was ready this time. Using a move Daniel had seen her practice, she redirected his momentum, sending him crashing into a console. Sparks erupted as his cybernetics connected with the electronics. But Korik wasn't done. He pulled himself up, damaged but still dangerous. "I'll kill you all with my bare hands if necessary." That's when Daniel acted. Despite the burning pain in his ribs, despite the blood loss making him dizzy, he threw himself at Korik, not with skill or grace, but with the desperate strength of a father protecting his family. They crashed to the ground, rolling across the bridge. Korik was stronger, but Daniel had something Korik didn't, someone worth dying for. He managed to grab Korik's damaged arm, twisting it until the cybernetics sparked and failed. Korik threw him off, and Daniel hit the wall hard. His vision blurred, darkness creeping in at the edges. He saw Korik advancing on him, blade raised. Then Rinla was there, her own combat blade drawn. But this wasn't the defensive fighting from before. This was a Catherian warrior protecting her family. The blade sang as it moved, a deadly dance that Korik, damaged and half-blind with rage, couldn't match. "You talk about the natural order," she said, driving him back. "Here's nature, a mother protecting her young. You're not that human brat's mother." "No, but I choose to be." She disarmed him with a move that looked effortless. "That's what you never understood. Family isn't about blood or species. It's about choice." Korik stumbled back, weaponless, his cybernetics failing. "The fleet will still burn. The Black Sun will rise." "Look outside," Rinla said. Through the viewport, the first ships of the Joint Fleet were arriving. Human and Catherian vessels flying in formation. Something that hadn't happened in 20 years. And among them, smaller ships, civilian vessels, including ones Daniel recognized from the lower districts of Haven Prime. The enhanced humans had come to fight. "Your Black Sun fleet is outnumbered 3-1, Rinla continued. "And, unlike 15 years ago, we're united against you." Korik laughed, a broken sound. "You think you've won, you've only delayed the inevitable. There will always be those who believe in purity, in superiority, in the natural order of things." "Maybe," Daniel said. managing to pull himself up despite everything. But there will always be people like us too. People who choose compassion over fear, unity over division. People with warm souls, Rinla added, moving to support Daniel. Korik looked between them, his ruined face showing something that might have been envy. You really believe your weakness is strength? It's not weakness. Lila's voice came over the comm. She had found her way to the bridge and stood in the doorway, no longer the frightened child, but something fiercer. It's love, and love is the strongest thing there is. Korik made one last desperate lunge for the control device. Rinla's blade found him first. He fell, his damaged systems finally failing completely. As he lay dying, he looked at them with his one remaining eye. The child, he whispered. Protect the child. Both of them. Daniel wasn't sure if he meant it as a threat or, in his final moments, something else. But Korik died before he could clarify, his body finally still. The bridge was quiet except for the sound of Daniel's labored breathing. Rinla quickly moved to tend his wound, using emergency medical supplies from the bridge kit. You saved me, Daniel said as she worked. You saved me first. It seemed only fair to return the favor. Lila ran to them, careful not to jostle Daniel's injury. Is it over? This part is, Rinla said, looking out at the space battle beginning between the Black Sun fleet and the Allied forces. But there's still work to do. She moved to the communications console and began transmitting the data crystal's contents to every ship in the fleet, ensuring the information about the Silence weapon and Black Sun agents reached everyone who needed it. Within hours, the battle was over. The Black Sun fleet, faced with overwhelming opposition and with their command structure destroyed, surrendered or fled. The Silence weapon facilities were located and destroyed. The embedded agents were identified and arrested. Daniel spent 3 weeks in a medical facility recovering from his injuries. Rinla and the children never left his side. The doctors, a mix of human and alien specialists, marveled at how quickly he healed, joking that stubbornness was the best medicine. On the day of his release, they stood on an observation deck of Haven Prime's newest district, one being built specifically for mixed-species families. The archivist had pulled strings to get them housing there, saying it was the least the galaxy owed them. So what now? Daniel asked, watching Lila play with Kree in a park designed for children of all species. Now we live, Rinla said simply. We raise the children. We work to make sure something like the Black Sun never rises again. Together. She looked at him. This human who had opened his door to an enemy and changed the course of history with simple kindness. Together, she confirmed. We're family now. By choice, which makes it stronger than any bond of blood or species. Daniel thought of Sarah, of how she would have loved this strange, beautiful family they'd become. He thought of the dock worker he'd been, struggling just to survive. That man was gone, replaced by someone who'd learned that sometimes the smallest acts of compassion could save worlds. Daddy Rinla, look, Lila called out. She was helping Kree take his first wobbling steps, the human child guiding the child of 2 species, proving that the future didn't have to repeat the past's mistakes. Coming, Daniel called back, taking Rinla's scaled hand in his human one. They walked together toward their children, toward their future, toward a life that neither could have imagined when a wounded alien had collapsed at a poor human's door. The galaxy was vast and often cruel. But in that moment, in that place, love had won. The records would say that the Second Black Sun War was prevented by fleet actions and political maneuvering. The truth was simpler and more profound. It was stopped by a father's love, a warrior's choice, a child's wisdom, and the warm soul that had brought them all together. Somewhere in the administrative archives of Haven Prime, a small note was added to the official record. The Hart Rinla family was instrumental in preventing catastrophe. Recommend highest civilian honors and permanent protected status. But in the park, as Lila laughed and Kree took another stumbling step. As Daniel and Rinla watched with the pride of parents everywhere, honors and recognition meant nothing. They had each other. They had chosen each other. And in a galaxy full of divisions and ancient hatreds, that choice made all the difference. The war was over. Their life together had just begun. Years later, when historians tried to identify the moment the galaxy truly began to heal from the wounds of the Great Silence War, many would point to grand treaties or epic battles. But those who truly understood pointed to something smaller, the moment a poor human single father opened his door to a hungry alien and her baby, and offered them the last of his food. Because sometimes, the smallest lights cast the longest shadows, and sometimes, the warmest souls can thaw the coldest wars. In a small apartment in Haven Prime's mixed district, as night fell over the city, a human man tucked in an enhanced human girl, while a Catherian woman sang a human baby to sleep. It wasn't the family any of them had planned. It was the family they had chosen. And that made it perfect.